and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. One thing I'm going to start off with is Ross Albright, the man charged with running the Silk Road and various crimes associated with that. Many libertarians have stood up for him, and I have an article. I got a couple clips to play, but he was sentenced to life in prison, so that's the big breaking news right now. And I got an article from Jeffrey Tucker, and I got a couple clips from We Are Change that I'm going to start the show off with. The one from Jeffrey Tucker at tucker.liberty.me. The deeply tragic sentencing of Ross Albright. Says, if you didn't know it already, the sentencing of Ross Albright, life in prison, underscores the point. There are deep structural injustices that take place in the United States under the cover of law and justice. This is one of the most egregious I've seen. This brilliant and creative young man has been put away for performing a much-needed digital experiment. He opened an open-air market in the digital cloud and thereby demonstrated to the world that there is a better way than the state's deeply destructive war on drugs. For having done so, he is now sentenced and put away. Yes, the whole thing makes me deeply sad and very angry. All over the world, economists are working on advanced applications of what is called experimental economics. It is an attempt to run controlled experiments on issues of human choice. The Nobel Prize Committee has rewarded these attempts. The ongoing problem with the field, as the practitioners all know, is that they take place in artificial environments. You can simulate trade and choice, but you cannot recreate the authentic risk, ownership, and daring that are required in real markets. What Ross did in founding the Silk Road, a darknet market, is take this whole field to a new level. He sought to conduct an experiment. What would happen if there were a realm of exchange that completely bypassed all elements of coercive control, regulation, and taxing? What would people use it for? Would it be orderly? Could it make a dent in the vast global underground economy? that is currently controlled by drug lords and other criminal elements. The results were marvelous. People from all over the world used private browsers to access the private website and traded billions in an entirely peaceful way. The drug lords must have been running scared. Yes, most of the products were illegal drugs, but keep in mind that during these years, the dominant product, mainly marijuana, became legal in many places. Ross is being jailed for being ahead of his time. More importantly, what Ross found is that there is massive pent-up demand for products that are wrongly made illegal all over the world. The war on drugs has empowered drug lords, corrupted political systems, militarized the police, and led to countless deaths, and meanwhile done nothing to stop the spread of narcotics. Ross's solution was a peaceful market in the cloud where buyers and sellers could exchange peer-to-peer. His experiment proved that a new system would actually work. Ross did not create a black market. He provided a peaceful alternative to the one that already exists, and he brought to it producer accountability, user ratings, and quality control. He began the process of toppling the drug lords from their perches of power. This is a huge innovation on the level of many other peer-to-peer technologies over time. Yes, he took the risk to do this, but he acted out of love for liberty and drive to innovate. So this is the system. If you are a 10-year professor performing artificial trading experiments in a classroom and publishing your results in expensive journals, you are toasted as a genius and sometimes given prestigious prizes. And if you innovate with venture capital funding and the backing of large tech firms, you are rewarded with riches and fame. But if you are a quiet geek who creates a more realistic experiment online, one that actually benefits humanity and never sought funding from any establishment source, are you swept up in a string operation and jailed for decades? Don't see how this has anything to do with justice. As for the online markets themselves, the jailing of Ross does nothing to stop them. They are now larger than ever. The old Silk Road is still around under its third iteration, but there are now many more. Indeed, there are dozens. They are doing a bang-up business and not making the same mistakes that Ross did. Meanwhile, there are vast and legal operations of selling pot that are active in all parts of the country. Entrepreneurs in this sector are getting rich. And meanwhile, the earnest and brilliant Ross is taken from us and holed up in a jail. Yes, this is unjust. I can't say whether Ross was in technical violation of the law, but it doesn't matter. Let us just say it. What's wrong is the law itself. Now, I got two clips here. I'm going to play. The first one is Ross Albright's lawyer and mother reaction to life in jail. And another one, breaking government-ran drug website that killed 2 people. So, kind of, take into account that, he's jailed for this, and at the same time, the government ran a drug website that killed 2 people. So, let's go ahead and get to these.
Fair, based on improper considerations that have no basis in fact or law. Yes, of course. The verdict and the sentence. Well, what she took was the unanimous consensus of professionals who have studied this site as objective, independent, professional researchers, and reduced it to a selection of a word here and a word there and twisted it on its head. The fantasy is that long sentences make any difference. The fantasy is that the internet will not be a source for drugs or illegality because of this sentence. The fantasy is that this sentence is anything more than just purely punitive and completely beyond the range of what drug offenders get in this district, in this circuit, in this country. Every single drug case has the same elements here, yet Mr. Ulbricht was saddled with all of it. And that's unfair, unjust, and unreasonable. Appeal. We appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. We appeal the verdict at trial, also some of the pretrial issues, and the sentencing itself as well. Just generally, the pretrial motions on suppression. The verdict, the trial issues are mostly about the curtailment of the defense case, not only with respect to experts, but also obviously you now know what we were burdened by at trial, which was the fact that we knew that the case agent who made the first contact with Dread Pirate Roberts was in fact entirely corrupt, that he had a Confederate Secret Service agent who was entirely corrupt, and that we were not permitted to use that information in any respect, even though Agent Duryagan, who was there today at the sentencing at the government table, Duryagan from Chicago, was in intimate and regular contact with them, and it was a major issue in the course of their investigation. But we were prevented from using any of that at trial. That is going to be an issue. We have issues with the experts. We have issues with the prejudice of uncharged, unproven conduct that drove this sentence dramatically. It was not about the crime that he was convicted of. This was about appeals to emotion. There are reasons why we've evolved for 2,000 years from a society, from a civilization that let the victim decide the punishment. And unfortunately, after 2,000 years of progress in that regard, we are moving back in the opposite direction. And there was a transparent appeal by the government to emotion beyond what the crime was. It's a hard question to answer. Because surprise, I mean, am I surprised? I'm disappointed tremendously. But obviously this was a possibility. So you prepare yourself for all of the possible ramifications of what's going to occur. So disappointment. Disappointment is probably the major emotion I feel. Sure. If you have specific questions, if they're willing to answer, okay.
Yeah, if I can talk. Very heartbreaking. I feel for anyone who's lost a loved one to drug abuse. It's a horrifying tragedy. It is. And it was terribly, terribly upsetting here. I think he showed that he does feel remorse for anything that might have caused harm inadvertently through this. I know Ross. I know how compassionate he is. There's 100 letters that have been submitted to the court saying how compassionate and empathetic he is. And of course he was moved by it. It was obvious.
Can I answer the remorse question? Yeah. Can I answer the remorse question a little bit too? Because this is an interesting issue. You know, Mr. Nash got 17 months. Pleaded guilty to the entire indictment, took the entire weight of the drugs, got a minor role reduction as he deserved, and I wasn't suggesting that his sentence should be the same as Mr. Ulbricht's. But what you have here is 17 months versus life. The only difference between them is one person pleaded guilty and one person exercised their constitutional right to trial. This is what we call trial tax. And here, it's beyond a tax.
Yes, we really do need support to appeal, and freeross.org is where you go. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. I'm sorry. With Ross? None. No. No. Oh, well, Ross was crying during his statement. You know, he's looking at his life being destroyed. And, of course, but he's also was very moved by those stories, as we all were. But like Mr. Draytel said, I feel like it's also somewhat exploitive and appealing to emotion, and I think personally somewhat of a distraction from the corruption allegations that were made and the revelations that were made. There's a lot of questions that have not been answered about that corruption. There's still sealed information about it. In my mind, there's still questions about the whole integrity of the evidence. And the other thing that's interesting is 2 of those overdose deaths happened while the government had the server. They owned it and controlled it, and they kept it open for business, and those 2 deaths happened. And by their logic, are they liable as well? Haven't thought that far. I am. Not really, you know. We've been taking this thing day by day. It's pretty overwhelming, just one day at a time, to be honest. We've been trying to determine, we're very concerned for safety. We've been told by people who've been in maximum security prisons that it's violent and very dangerous. Ross is not violent. He is not someone, and that's been proven by the letters from the inmates and guards that he's been with in New York. He's nothing but a positive influence. He's totally nonviolent. And to put him in a maximum security penitentiary, I fear for his safety. I fear for his life. And I think a medium security place would be much safer. But with this sentence, I don't know if that can be possible.
Okay, here's the next clip.
Rehabilitation is done, but it is about punishment and making him an example. And I didn't think that's what justice was supposed to do, was make people examples. I thought it was supposed to be an individual case. And also based on what was convicted at trial, it seemed that she relied very heavily on unconvicted, uncharged allegations that have not been proven.
Murder for hire.
Yeah, murder for hire. And of course, my heart breaks for those parents. Today, it was very moving, very upsetting, but at the same time, I feel like Josh was correct that we need to stick with the law and not bring emotional components into it. That the pathologist that the defense hired, we hired, has a lot of questions about those autopsies and all of that. And so I feel like there's a lot of emotion, and that's been filed, and so that's available publicly. But anyway.
The judge spoke about all the consequences. I just wondered if you agreed with that or disagreed. Go on.
I'm not sure how, to be honest, since the corruption situation, some of it's still sealed. We have no idea of the scope of it. I am not convinced totally that Ross was the one and only DPR running the whole thing the whole time. I have, no idea. Of course, there are consequences to actions. I do not advocate drug use at all. And in fact, I would recommend do not do them. But at the same time, the drug war, I think, has been a complete failure. It's bloating our prisons with nonviolent people like Ross and giving draconian sentences for decades for nonviolent crimes. And
can you tell us about the anomalies of the case with the federal agents?
Say again?
Can you tell us about the anomalies of the case with the federal agents that were also indicted, and also some of the things that should have been heard in court?
Wow, that's a pretty big question the state of my mind is in right now. There's a lot. A lot of that, as I said, is still sealed. It seems that it was just dismissed. It wasn't even considered. And it wasn't allowed to be brought before the jury. And the reasoning was, it would jeopardize the investigation of these agents. And it turned out they already knew they were being investigated, so that wasn't even true. So that seemed very wrong. It seems outrageous, actually. And there were other things in the trial as well. But, yeah.
You said the government had control of the Silk Road when it was giving out drugs as well?
They seized the server. They got the server June 2013. And I believe 2 of these overdose deaths happened after that. So they could have shut down that server at any time. They kept it open for business. Chuck Schumer said, I saw him on film say, we need to shut this site down as soon as possible before it does more damage. No, they didn't. They kept it open for 4 more months. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other? Yeah, I do. I am. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So you have it there. And the thing is that they did keep it operating for 4 months. Some of these drug overdoses from drugs that were obtained on Silk Road happened after the federal government supposedly took control of the server. Are they being charged? They operated it for 4 months, probably got some money out of it for 4 months. But we also know, you know, from the freeway Ricky Ross and this, that government has been involved in drugs. And probably where the whole escalation of Ross and the attack on Ross and the life, this was probably because the Silk Road probably was dipping into, you know, these special operation things that go on with the drug war, how they get their money and they deal in the drugs. They bring drugs into the country. They make profits. They finance their own operations. You know, all that's been exposed with government agents and agencies involved in drugs here in America. He had a peaceful workaround. That threatened that whole monopoly, basically. And, you know, it's one of those things that the way the justice system is set up, the way law enforcement is set up, it's so evident, I think, to most people that it's set up against the American people. It's basically servitude enforcers. If you're not willing to do what we say, pay your taxes, and we can make a profit off of you, and we can use you, our law enforcement and our justice system is set up to profit off of you in one way or another. You can walk the line that they want you to walk, pay your taxes, work a regular job, do this, do that. Or if you go off the path, well, we'll make money off of you one way or another. And, you know, we have prisons for profit. And they are, you know, filling up. It's pretty evident. Now, when you see these Black Lives Matter, yes, Black Lives Matter. So do white lives, so do Hispanics, you know, Europeans, Asians, you know, list goes on and on. The fallacy I think that a lot of people buy into is we're being targeted. You know, you'll see all these about, you know, the blacks being targeted. Well, yeah, you are being targeted. Then you'll see, well, those white people get targeted too. Yes, you get targeted too. Native Americans get targeted. It's, you know, the list goes on and on. And you have to understand we're used as a tool. And I like I said, when it starts becoming something that starts affecting more people, there'll have to be a breaking point eventually. And here's one. This is from the Free Thought Project. ABC News reporter arrested after police said his camera put their lives in danger. Baton Rouge, Louisiana reporter Brett Buffington was arrested on Thursday morning for attempting to take photos of a crime scene and then later mouthing off to officer at the scene. Probably saying, "I have a right to film," or something to that point, was mouthing off. Bluffington was charged with interfering with an officer and intimidating a public official. The police claim that Buffington interfered with a burglary investigation around 2:30 in the early morning of Thursday. However, according to the police department's version of events, Buffington was simply doing his job as a journalist and attempting to investigate a crime, just as the police allegedly were. The police report stated that Buffington disobeyed police officers when they asked him to leave the area, but instead took photos. The officers said that the flash from the camera diverted their attention and put their lives in danger. After that, Buffington was detained for a period of time and given a summons to appear in court on a criminal offense and was again told to leave. Buffington did leave this time, however. As he was walking away, he said to officers, "Hope you enjoy the rest of your career." This seemed to damage the officer's ego so bad he arrested the journalist. Hopefully, WBRZ will stand by the reporter, but the network has been unclear about their position thus far, making only the following statement. WBRZ is working with our employee and the Baton Rouge Police Department to determine the full details of what occurred. WBRZ News Director Chuck Bark said in an email response to the Advocate. The Baton Rouge Police Department has its share of unscrupulous cops. For starters, Buffington is the second person in 6 months to be arrested for recording or photographing police. In December, a Virginia man visited a friend in Baton Rouge, was thrown to the ground, assaulted, and arrested after filming an officer roughing someone up. In February, the Baton Rouge Police Department came under fire after the maid of a parade floating mocking a woman for being raped as a child. So, we are starting to see where, when the local news starts getting bullied, there should be a wake-up call. And hopefully, the news network, sticks by them. But being, a part of an affiliate, will they be almost in a way kind of forcing them to, "We have to let you go if you won't know. I want them to apologize. They need to come out and, well, no, we gotta let you go." It'll probably end up that, or, we'll say that both people were wrong and we just went about our way. And basically not holding the Baton Rouge Police Department accountable. And that's usually what we see. In no way do they usually get held accountable by affiliate local news stations. Now, independent media, alternative media, is the reason a lot of these abuses by law enforcement are being held accountable by any type of news source. But it's also been people with their cell phones, with cameras, pulling them out. And as we also see, that sometimes puts you in danger. But, we have to start holding these law enforcement accountable. And with technology always seeming to be used against us, we should be happy to, be able to turn the table on them. Now, again, I warn people about the bandwagon, jumping on these bandwagons where you have these protests that seem to be more of a divide and conquer, not, let's unite. But, that's going to be completely up to us what we do. Okay, I have one here. Liberty Report, Ron Paul Liberty Report. Will Congress say Patriot Act and does it matter? And, this kind of goes back to the police state. The Patriot Act is something that's helped embolden the police state. We have always had the corruption. But this is the way federal government kind of gets away with it. They make it law. And, it's set to expire Sunday. Will the Patriot Act or the Freedom Act get passed? Freedom Act's a little bit better, but not going to stop data collection. So, let's go ahead and get on to this.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Ron Paul Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams as the co-host. Daniel, welcome today.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Good. As you know, we have a special guest today, and he's a friend of ours, and he's worked for me for a long time, and he's been on our show before, and his specialty is keeping up with what those guys are doing to us up in Washington. And in particular today, we want to visit with him on the Patriot Act.
Norm?
Norm, can I remember your name, Norm? Norm, welcome to our program today.
Thank you.
All right, very good. But we do want to talk about the Patriot Act because a lot is going on, and we've talked about it a lot, and we talked with you once on this not too long ago, and that has to do with the expiration of the Patriot Act at the end of this month. So are we going to be lucky enough that this will be gone on June 4th? And I know there's going to be legislative activity. I think the Senate's going into session over the weekend. And from my viewpoint, it looks like several things could happen. One, they could just let it expire. That's, I guess, a dream. The other thing is that they could pass the reform bill, which is the U.S. Freedom Act, or they could go along with reauthorization of the original bill. Tell us where we are legislatively, and tell us what you think is going to happen come Sunday night.
Well, at Campaign for Liberty, we're working very hard to try to stop this. We've been running a really successful program. Grassroots people are really energized with this. And Dr. Paul, as you've always said, this is another example where the people are so far ahead of the politicians in terms of wanting their liberty back. And unfortunately, the politicians still haven't gotten the message. So we're going to have to work a little bit harder and maybe even through the weekend and past the weekend. Sunday evening, the Senate comes back into session at, I believe, 5. And unfortunately, they're only 3 votes away from getting enough to bring the USA Freedom Act to the floor. So we need to hold that. But even if they do that, the good news is that all that one senator would have to do is hold up the debate for 30 hours. And I think they could extend the debate to Thursday, which would push us past the expiration date, which would mean at that point USA Freedom might not be a valid bill anymore. They would have to then go back and write another bill. And then they would have to go through the House and Senate asking people to basically revote the Patriot Act, at which point it's a new ballgame. And who knows what kind of stuff might be in that, both bad, but maybe even something good like Thomas Massey's bills to actually put
real restraint, not phony restraint, on the surveillance state.
You know, under these circumstances, so often people look for compromises, come to the middle, and that's the Reform Act. Now, Daniel's looked at this, and he has a precise question about this, is this really good reform, and why are some of our pretty good guys in the Senate and the House tempted to vote for this, Daniel?
Yeah, it's interesting, Norm, that everywhere you see it in the mainstream media, the Freedom Act is always billed as this is the reform bill, and it makes it palatable, it makes it sound good. But from our reading of the Freedom Act, and I think you concur, it actually could be worse than the Patriot Act. First of all, we recently had this development where an appeals court ruled the Patriot Act, parts of the Patriot Act illegal because the act wasn't specific enough. And this bill seems like it would take care of that problem and would be specific. We actually ran an unnamed Capitol Hill source that Lou Rockwell wrote up, and this individual said that that there could be even more bulk collection under the Freedom Act than the Patriot Act.
You're right. It does actually, for the first time, explicitly put into law that bulk collection is authorized. The proponents of it say, well, it's much less than what the NSA has been doing on their own. And whatever the merits or demerits, and personally I think that there's still no reason to authorize bulk collection. If the NSA is doing it on their own, you put into law that says you can't do that. You have to go to a Article III court and get a warrant. But after that, like you said, Daniel, after that appeals court decision, it's inexcusable for Congress to even consider authorizing this. And I don't understand why so many people who claim to be on our side are falling for this phony compromise. I think it's two things. One, there's a fear of appearing too extreme because, you can't get rid of the Patriot Act. Don't you remember 9/11? So they want to feel like they're reasonable. And secondly, there's this, as both Daniel, you and Dr. Paul know, there's this obsession with getting things done in D.C., which leads a lot of politicians and outside groups and think tanks to say, well, what will the political class accept today? Because politics is the art of the possible, but they never think, gee, by taking a stronger position, how can we make what is impossible today the possible tomorrow? You know,
the details of this to me are very important, but the debate is important too, because when the court ruled, they ruled not anything to do with the Constitution or the Fourth Amendment. They just said that, well, legally it wasn't permissible, so therefore we just write a law. But the court didn't deal with the Constitution, and even this debate doesn't deal with the Constitution. Why can they just, change the law and put it into the bill and say, that we can do it now because it's legal to do it? It's just, to me, it's tragic that is always ignored. I was once told in Congress that when I brought the Constitution up and I was put down, and Norm, I think you might remember this, it was on the Workforce Committee, had to do with education. And I said, what about the Constitution now? And the chairman of the committee said, we don't deal with that. We always leave that to the courts. And I think that's part of where our problem is today.
There was that, and there was also, remember Henry Hyde's famous quote, which I know Daniel and you, Dr. Paul, remember well, that certain parts of the Constitution are, was it outdated?
Anachronistic.
Anachronistic, yes. So, and actually, if people want a reasonable compromise, I can suggest one. How about the Fourth Amendment, which says that the government actually can spy on you, can collect your data, can monitor your phone calls. All they have to do is go to a court, not the phony FISA court, but a real Article III independent court, show actual facts that demonstrate probable cause that you're a bad actor, and get a little thing called a warrant. That seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable compromise, because it's not telling the government you can never monitor terrorists or other bad actors. It's just saying you actually have to show a reason before you look at our private information.
We put up a video on the Institute website yesterday of Judge Napolitano, and he made some of the points you're making. He certainly said that the FISA court is a joke. He pointed out that out of 34,000 requests since 2001, all but 12 were granted. But he made another interesting point, Norm. I don't know if you had a chance to see the video, but he believes that the NSA bulk collection of Americans will continue no matter what happens. And his rationale is that there's Section 702, I believe it was, of the FISA law. But the other one that really struck me is a secret executive order signed by Bush in 2001 that directs the NSA to do this. And as Napolitano said, because the NSA is under the Defense Department and the president is commander-in-chief, that they may well continue to do this as a direct order of the commander-in-chief. So this whole debate may just be for show.
The Patriot Act stopped and 215 repealed. We still do have, as you pointed out, a lot of work to do. In addition to the executive order that you cited, there's also the executive order, I think it's 2133 that Reagan signed in 81, which has been used to justify bulk collection of our cell phone records, which always struck me as a little odd because what was some of our younger viewers might not remember this, but back in 1981, phones were still in your wall, and there was no such thing. I don't think even the personal computer had caught on yet, much less the laptops and tablets and all this technology, and yet that's being used. And I think you're right. Unless we this is going to be a long-term process. And we've gone further, actually, just in even delaying it and renewing and highlighting public attention to it and following up on this has been a tremendous achievement. But we need to keep fighting this battle because they're going to keep coming back to us. And the only way we can stop it is eventually just get rid of all these this mass surveillance apparatus and rein them in.
Right. Now, once again, I think the real issue is the technical factors here of what the law might say and how they're going to get around it versus the Constitution. But it is, and I really agree with Napolitano on his statement that it is, and Norm makes the point too, it's out of control government that is the problem. So if you don't declare war, the president declares war. If you don't finance it, they steal the money someplace, and the CIA goes into the drug business. All kinds of things that get around this, executive orders. That's where the real problem is. But there was a funny incident, not funny, it was sort of silly. My very first year I was in Congress, I won a special election in 1976. And there was an IMF bill, and that was one of my big interests, as it has always been, the monetary system. So they had the IMF bill, and the rationale for this is why it had to be passed is in 1971, we changed the law. We went off the gold standard and all these major changes. So for 5 years, we had been living outside the law. So they explained to me very clearly, well, we have been doing these things, and the law didn't conform to it. So we're changing the law to keep up with what we've been doing. And they do that all the time. And if nobody notices, they don't even change the law. When they change the law, that means capitulation by the people are sort of saying that is our endorsement. That's their sort of their confession to go along with it.
And that's what we might see this week with the USA Freedom Act. And it really is amazing that that court decision just seems to have not affected the position of any so-called civil libertarian who's supporting this bill.
I think all you need to really know about the Freedom Act is that Obama loves it and he wants it passed. If he wanted to end bulk collection, he could do it. So obviously this is not in his.
And yet, according to a certain senator from South Carolina and a certain representative from New York, if you don't oppose mass surveillance and bulk collection and unlimited war, you don't belong in the Republican Party. So I guess Obama is a Republican, and I guess therefore Obamacare is a Republican program, at least according to some so-called conservatives.
Right. Well, anyway, this will be a busy weekend. I want to thank you, Norm, for being here with us today. And I'm sure that we are not going to have more freedom by Monday morning, but that doesn't mean that we can't keep doing what we're doing and what Campaign for Liberty is doing. They did a great job on teaching people about the danger of the Federal Reserve System, and now the work that they're doing. The people's attitudes have to change. When the people's attitudes change and the people are determined, some of the things we're talking about become insignificant because the people then influence the people and only send people there that agree with us. And that is where I'm optimistic. I think there's a growing number of people who are coming our way. We obviously don't have anything like a majority in Washington, but like Norm said, they're getting good responses, and the people are probably way ahead of Congress. I've said that for years, that the Congress is way behind. I figure 10, 15 years behind the people. So anyway, thanks again, Norm, and I'd like to thank our viewers today and come back to the Liberty Report soon.
Okay. Now, I got a couple articles. One directly here, related with the NSA. Let's pop up here. And this comes out of the LA Times. Or wait, it's taking forever. Okay, here we go. Now this one says, if NSA surveillance program ends, phone record trove will endure. I found this through Drudge Report. Let's just take for this thing to load. The National Security Agency will mothball its mammoth archive of American cell phone records, isolating the computer servers where they are stored and blocking investigators' access, but will not destroy the database if its legal authority to collect the material expires on schedule this Sunday, officials said Thursday. The NSA's determination to keep billions of domestic toll records for counterterrorism and espionage investigation adds another note of uncertainty to a debate that pits the Obama administration's national security team against opponents who argue the government data trove violates Americans' privacy and civil liberties. The political and legal dispute will come to a head Sunday when the Republican-led Senate returns to work a day early to seek a resolution hours before the law used to authorize the controversial NSA program and several other key counterterrorism provisions expires at 11:59. The final 8 hours starting 3:59 p.m. Sunday will see a flurry of activity at U.S. phone companies and at the NSA as engineers take down servers, reconfigure monitoring software, and unplug hardware from the main pipeline of telephone data traffic, according to several senior administration officials. If the Senate stalemate pushes past 7:59 p.m., holes in the incoming data will begin to appear and will grow until nothing is collected after midnight, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. To discuss internal planning, we are in uncharted waters, one official said. We have not had to confront addressing the terrorist threat without these authorities, and it's going to be fraught with unnecessary risk. At that point, even if the Senate acts, the official said it could take 3 or 4 days to go back to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, also known as FISA Court, for a legal order to restart the system, to reboot the complex data transfer networks at the telephone companies at NSA headquarters at Fort Meade. Any Senate action short of approving legislation that already has passed the House will result in a gap in the NSA archive of so-called metadata. Records that show the time, date, and numbers called, but not the content of virtually every domestic phone call. And they said that's complete BS when it comes to the smartphone and what they're tracking and able to see. There's been many leaks that they say that content can be watched. It says letting the bulk collection program go dark even for a few days is playing national security Russian roulette, said another official, hoping that we don't have an incident where the FBI needs the data to do a national security investigation. If lawmakers vote before 8 p.m. Sunday, the NSA could reverse the shutdown and prevent a gap, the official said. But the last hour possibility appears unlikely. Senator Rand Paul, who is running for GOP presidential nomination and who has fought the NSA domestic program and filibuster to stop it, told supporters in a fundraising letter Thursday that he was determined to regulate the NSA's illegal spy program to the trash bin of history where it belongs. Administration officials have stepped up their own alarms on Wednesday. Attorney General Loretta Lynch said a failure to act would cause a serious lapse in our ability to protect the American people. Oh, you don't protect nothing but your own butts. The provision in the law used to authorize the NSA's bulk collection program is one of the three legal authorities set to expire. U.S. intelligence and law enforcement officials say all three are vital to tracking potential terrorists in the United States. The bulk collection of U.S. phone records was started in secret after September 11, 2001 terrorist attack. It was specifically authorized by the FISA court starting in 2006 and was revealed to the public in 2013. Well, it was revealed through leaks, and we were called conspiracy theorists before 2013. But once Edward Snowden came out, when you guys probably decided it was convenient, it was, made official. And things Edward Snowden has revealed after that have shown that they can see content too. President Obama vowed to change the NSA program after Snowden's disclosure sparked an uproar. The White House has embraced the so-called U.S. Freedom Act, which passed the House on May 13th by a bipartisan vote of 338 to 88. The measure would shift the burden of holding the data back to the telephone companies and require them to configure their systems so the NSA could access the data. So basically, they could access the data and not tell anybody they're doing it. Then they can confirm things and then go get a warrant and then collect the data they need and then, So it would also require government to get a court order to search the records for telephone numbers linked to suspected terrorists at home and abroad. It sets a 6-month transition period for the changes to take effect. And I'm not going to read the rest of this, but it's been noted that it actually does something even beyond what the Patriot Act does and defines collecting bulk data. Just after the court rules that, the Patriot Act didn't do that. Therefore, they were going to strike Section 215, I believe it was, down. Then here's one from truthandmedia.com, formerly benswan.com. Exclusive South Carolina Congressman Mark Sanford talks 28 pages. Rand's filibuster and the rise of Liberty Caucus. South Carolina Congressman Mark Sanford said that Kentucky Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul's NSA filibuster will lend a fighting chance in the attempt to remove Section 215 of the Patriot Act. This is real, a 2,000-year-old debate between security and liberty, explained Sanford in an exclusive interview with Truth and Media's Joshua Cook. What historically happened is that civilizations traded off liberty in the hope of gaining security. Sanford explained that there is a historic tension between security and freedom, which is what's at play currently with the NSA. Quote, I think the problem with the NSA, again, is we know what's best for y'all, he added. I think the Constitution knows what's best for us. He further explained what's happening with the Patriot Act. Quote, what I think is going to happen is that McConnell is going to come back with some kind of jam technique on the last hours of May 31st. Tragically, the House went ahead with its bill. I voted against it. It basically codifies language that the courts have said was illegal, which is kind of crazy. Hopefully we can get it stopped on the Senate side, and we'll see what happens. Sanford also stressed the importance of liberty and liberty lovers. It's a credit to all of the folks out there that love liberty, he said. Sanford has seen a House not focused on liberty, but he's quick to point out the times have changed. Now, he said, there's a great group of liberty-focused individuals that do form a caucus, Sanford said, of the Republican Liberty Caucus. Cook asked Congressman Sanford about his experience reading the classified 28 pages in the 9/11 report. Though Sanford couldn't discuss the details of the classified report, he did share his personal thoughts with Cook and criticized the government's lack of transparency. Sanford told Cook, it cements my belief in the importance of government being transparent about what they do and why they do it. I think that for people to trust their government, they may agree or may disagree with the decision, but they want to know why, and too often people are told, just trust us. It is not appropriate, or you don't have the capacity to know. That's just not true, said Sanford. Open and free governments are built upon transparency so that people can look under the hood and say, I agree or disagree, and consequently hold people accountable. And when things are hidden, people can't do that. These kind of things, for me, reinforce my belief in the importance of freedom, resting on openness and transparency in the way the government conducts its business. And they got more of the interview in audio form if you go to truthandmedia.com. Okay. Now we're going to move on here. Give me a second. Okay. I'm going to play this from Christopher Green, AMTV. He posted this yesterday. Overnight collapse in the U.S. dollar to shock America.
Get the ultimate in body armor protection from Fortress Survival, LLC. Get this multi-cam plate carrier front and back, 2 10x12 level 3 trauma plates, 2 6x6 side plates, all level 3 NIJ lab certified. High quality performance, hardcore protection for the ultimate prepper and survivalist in your family. Hard hit it! Fortress Survival, LLC. Get all of your body armor and survivalist related supplies and gear from Fortress Survival. Click the link below right now. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning in to AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is Wednesday, May 27th, I believe. I believe it's the 27th of May on Wednesday. And I get a lot of questions on how the dollar collapses, what to expect, what I think is going to happen. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball. I was talking about this on a promised subscriber AMA last night. In fact, I tweeted it out. Go check it out. Our subscriber, one of our longtime subscribers, Michael, asked me a series of questions over about 50 minutes. He wanted to know how and why this dollar situation is taking place and really what to expect. What do I think is going to happen? Well, in the next 2 years, and I think this could happen today, this could happen tomorrow, this could happen a week from now, this could happen a month from now, it could happen a year from now. But in the next 2 years, and I actually think we're seeing this play out now, there is going to be some kind of shock in regards to the U.S. dollar. What do I mean by that? Just like we saw not too long ago with the Swiss central bank depegging itself from the euro and that currency rapidly appreciating some 20% overnight, really bringing the market to its knees and catching everybody on Wall Street by surprise. I think the exact same thing is going to happen to the U.S. dollar, but it's going to happen in reverse. I think that the dollar is going to rapidly depreciate overnight, and it's going to create a panic, and it's going to cause a shock. More importantly, what you hear the pundits talk about, a liquidity crisis. I think we could very likely wake up. Let's say we go to bed this evening, and tomorrow we wake up, and the dollar is suddenly worth 20, 30% less than it was the day before. And of course, people will panic. People won't know what to do. Now, what will be the catalyst to this? I think the catalyst to all of this is a direct byproduct and consequence of all these bailouts that are currently in process now. Quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, Operation Twist, soon to be, I believe, likely in the near future, QE4. All of this excessive debt, this leverage, this Ponzi scheme, courtesy of the private criminal Federal Reserve. Those market participants, if you're listening to them, listening to many of these pundits on TV, on CNBC, are telling you right now that liquidity is the greatest risk to the market. Jamie Dimon, CEO of the criminal too big to fail bailout bank, JP Morgan Chase, is telling us this. People like Mohammed El-Arian of Allianz Investments is telling us this. People like Jim Paulson are telling us this. The pundits, the Wall Street quote-unquote experts, are all telling us this. Even those people on the inside like Jamie Dimon that, again, is in bed with Washington and the politicians that he owns. So at some point, I believe, in my opinion, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, I think that there's going to be a liquidity crisis and a liquidity shock central to the dollar. And I think it's going to create a panic. I think the catalyst is all of these programs that have been put in place really illegally, counterintuitively to the situation, to really just backstop the elite. Again, none of this had anything to do with saving you or saving the little guy or preventing the world from coming to an end. I mean, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit that they sold us. No, the only world coming to an end was this elite world, this world of elitism and, billionaires basically fleecing the little guy for a living. Those were the only people in a real panic. But of course, they engineered this crisis in the first place. Also, you'll notate that the Wall Street pundits are seeing and telling us that we're having greater moves and fluctuations daily in the currency markets, in the Forex market, foreign exchange, anything that we've ever seen. I mean, daily movements that are just honestly insane, uncanny, these dollar moves. Now, I think it's important not to focus on the short term. We saw the dollar rally over the last 6 months very aggressively because the pundits are saying it's the least dirty shirt in the dirty basket of laundry. And because, the euro's dirtier or these other currencies are dirtier, everyone's going to flock to the dollar. Well, we've since seen a reversal in the dollar. But if you look at a long-term chart of the dollar, you'll notice it's been on a steady decline over the past several decades, ever since the dollar went off the gold standard, post the Bretton Woods system, and it really depegged itself from anything of real value. It just became this artificial reality created by the Federal Reserve, backed and secured by nothing. As a result of this currency crisis, this currency shock, this currency war, I think that is going to have a ripple effect in the market itself, in global capital markets. It's going to affect stocks. It's going to affect bonds. Bonds, fixed income, U.S. Treasury debt is probably the biggest bubble at the moment that people are starting to talk about. We saw negative interest rates in Europe. We're still seeing it in places like Germany, for example. We're seeing these wild fluctuations in the 10-year Bund, for example, the 10-year German bond equivalent coming out of the Bundesbank of Germany. We're seeing these wild fluctuations. And as I talked about yesterday on this AMA, the subscriber AMA, the problem with this is the only entity providing liquidity to the market right now is the Federal Reserve itself. It is the buyer of last resort. It is the backstop to this liquidity crisis, which really is an illiquidity crisis. It used to be that China was, this large shareholder and owner of U.S. Treasury debt because there was actual real demand to hold U.S. Treasury bonds. But post all of these bailouts, post this world where the U.S. is a status quo empire, according to the former deputy director of the CIA, Michael Morrell, which he says is leading to war with China. Post all of this, nobody wants to own our widgets. Nobody wants to own U.S. Treasury bills or long-dated bonds because they're essentially worthless. We're printing to infinity. Everybody knows that we're super leveraged. So they're selling the asset. They're selling the widget. And what is happening, because there's no liquidity and because it's really an illiquidity crisis of sorts, the Federal Reserve is providing that backstop. They're buying all the bullshit that nobody else wants to own. They're buying the mortgage-backed securities. They're buying, all of these synthetic instruments that have been created just so the big banks can profit. So all of this, I believe, is transpiring now. All of this, I think, is playing out right now. And I think that we're going to see an overnight shock in the not-too-distant future centered and central to the U.S. dollar. And, of course, this plays into the new world reserve currency. This plays into the renminbi, the Chinese yuan, moving and taking greater market share as the reserve currency, the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, providing that counterpoint as a direct competitor to the long Western tried and true dominated IMF, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank. And of course, all of this is leading to war. So, it's important that we prepare now. It's important that you prepare 6 months in advance versus waiting to when the actual crisis hits. I mean, the last thing you want to do is be the guy with your pants around your ankles, with your hair on fire, screaming, holy shit, I should have done something. I should have prepared my family. That's why I've been a huge advocate of gold and silver. Should make a part of your portfolio. Precious metals, 10% I think is a healthy number. Please speak to your financial advisor, somebody that you trust. But you need to invest and diversify your family's risk into something real, something tangible. I mean, even if it's not precious metals, for example, it's not gold and silver. What I'm seeing a lot of wealthy people in my neighborhood doing is investing in things like art, fine art. We're seeing record sales unlike anything we've ever seen. We're seeing investment in collectible cars. Do you know it's actually easier, according to brokers, to sell a $2 million collectible car than it is a $200,000 collectible car? So we're seeing this money flood into collectibles. I mean, you could even own Rolexes, for example, a real, tangible thing. And that would be better than just holding all of your wealth in dollars, waiting for the shock. It's kind of a lesson number one that you learn in finance is to diversify your risk. It's not that, you should have all of your, investments in a single product or a single type of investment. You're supposed to diversify that risk. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot of people do. People with a lot more money than me investing in, again, things that are real, things that are tangible, farmland, water rights, investing in themselves. I talk about this all the time. You're the greatest asset that you have. Your physical health, your physical well-being, you should be making that your top investment. It's amazing to me people let their health go. They'll consume this artificial food that's being fed to us by corporate giants like McDonald's, for example, and they're getting fat and they don't know why. And I'll see people make investments to their 401k or their IRAs, but not themselves, not their health, which is really their greatest asset, or their education, for example. Your education or investing in your profession or investing in your proactive things that you can do. So although we have these very real risks present, we're living through this economic crisis right now. It's not that we should live in fear. I think that we should be optimistic and opportunistic about the future, but we should take the necessary steps now to prepare. So what I expect, in my humble opinion, is an overnight shock. I think it could happen as soon as today, as soon as tomorrow. And I really see it as a 2-year time horizon. I think we're living through now. We're seeing these wild fluctuations in the market, these parabolic moves, which will revert to the mean. I mean, you learn about this in mathematics. It's called a reversion to the mean. At some point, things will revert. It doesn't mean that things can't move parabolically a little bit longer, that we can't see this insanity, this casino that makes up Wall Street, shoot to Dow 20,000 over the next year. It's not that this can't continue a little bit longer. But if you break it down, typically we've had a major shock and a major crash in our markets roughly around every 8 years. If you go back to the 2000, 2001 tech bubble, and then you're looking at 2008, 2009, and that shock, and we're in about year 7 now. About every 8 years, we get that shock. But what's going to be very problematic for the Federal Reserve at this point is that there's no policy tool really left outside of them to use the tool of war, which I think is going to be the main policy tool in the not too distant future to reset all of this super leverage, to reset all of this debt. And, they can't lower interest rates. I guess that they can launch another version of QE4 or QE5 or just continue that Ponzi scheme. But in my opinion, they'll use war as the primary tool. And in addition to that, they'll just simply change the rules. They'll just tell you that overnight, oh, we changed the rules. There's a new currency. It turns out the dollar itself hasn't been working too well because all of you little people lost your money and there was a shock overnight that destroyed the dollar by 30% or maybe more. Now we're moving to a basket. Yeah, we're going to diversify the risk because this is better for you guys, even though it's better for them. We're going to diversify the risk with the dollar, with the euro, with the pound sterling. Maybe they'll throw the yuan in there, as what we're seeing with the AIIB, as that's the new reserve currency. They'll create this little diversified basket, this new world order coin, and it'll be the solution. Of course, they'll put it on a silver platter to you, not post the crisis, but during it. Again, all this backdoor dealing, all these bailouts, the trillions of dollars spent, really stolen from the American people, and those of you tuning in around the world, was all done. All these deals are done during the heart of the crisis, when the fear is at its height, when congressmen are talking about the fact that those in government are telling them if they don't vote for the bailouts, that it could result in martial law. This fear-mongering, which I think, ordinary people are accused of, or the alternative media is accused of, really is only coming from our federal government. I mean, look at Michael Morrell the other day telling us about a war with China. World War III is what he's talking about. He says it's an absolute risk. This mouthpiece of the CIA telling our leaders, our congressmen and senators, there would have been martial law if we didn't bail out the too-big-to-fail elitist banksters. People like Jamie Dimon now warning us about a liquidity shock. Isn't that funny? You see, the only fear-mongering is coming from these people, from our untrustworthy government that's been bought and paid for. And they're going to use the same tactics in the not-too-distant future during the shock, during the crisis of the dollar, this overnight move, which I think will happen over a series of time, which we're living through now, but we'll also have shocks along the way, just like what we saw in 08 and 09. And they're going to serve up that new world order currency, again, on a silver platter. It's going to provide the solution. There's going to be this big rally cry for war as America goes to war with the red giant that makes up China. Of course, they're going to demonize the Chinese. They're going to demonize China. They might have a new McCarthyism type, thing where, just like they did to the Japanese during World War II and sent them all to concentration camps just because they looked like a Jap. They might do the same thing with the Chinese, potentially target the Patriot movement, target Patriot states, as we're seeing with Jade Helm. Isn't it interesting that we have these war games taking place starting in June, I believe going through July and August, taking place in the liberty-oriented states. Isn't that interesting? It's just, we're going to have this huge military takeover, this war in our own country, which they say is an exercise in great states like Texas and Arizona and Nevada
and Utah, where basically all the militias are located and all the patriots are located. Isn't that interesting? Really, I think psychological warfare to basically get the American people used to this big brother, Orwellian situation where, the American people need to get used to this overarching, overreaching presence, in civilian life. Again, we've seen this in history, folks. It's extremely dangerous. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard-hitting it in your face. I'm Christopher Green. As usual, please support our sponsor. Peace.
So really what it comes down to, it's not, is there going to be a collapse? It's when, exactly how it can happen. And there's multiple ways that it can happen. But really, we've been seeing it happen. We've watched it happen. And, he brought up the collectibles and why wealthy people are really getting into collectibles, investing heavily into collectibles. They don't want the, $200,000 car that just came out. They want the collectible car. Why? Well, because these other countries like China that are starting to emerge as the world superpower, and Russia, kind of why we're feuding with Russia. Their part that they're playing in with China and this new world type currency that they're trying to prevail on, the yuan. We have a situation where these cars now, because our money has devalued so much, kind of like gold and silver, once it's converted into the U.S. dollars, guess what? It takes more U.S. dollars to equal what their currency is worth. Now, think about that. Didn't used to be that transfer, well, see, when it's going the other way, and you're selling these collectibles to places like China, Japan, Europe, parts of Europe at least, and it's usually the other wealthy people in those European countries too are buying up the collectibles from the U.S. What you're really seeing is a transfer of wealth. That's why the wealthy people are keeping a lot of this stuff. They're getting rid of other things to keep their way of life up. Because really, it's going to get to a point where if you're able to hold on to one of those cars, that means you actually still have some type of wealth or status. More than likely, I would think that what would happen in the U.S., you wouldn't see many people still here with those type of things. Because they really seem to be trying to make it third world. Not even second world, third world. With all the divide and conquer and trying to get, all the violence stirred up. It seems like they just want to leave us a war-torn type country. And if you're not prepping, I think you're putting your own life in danger, but, that's your choice. But, will it be a slow collapse or will it be one that overnight collapse, the shocks? It's really hard to tell at this point, but we understand what's happening geopolitical. We see the chess pieces being played, and we see the U.S.'s ability to sway other countries is really diminished. We kind of go in there and we still act as a tough dog, but it's more one of those Yeah, he's a tough dog, but he's got his own internal problems that are now starting to overshadow any type of world thing. You know, at what point will this tyrannical leader need to pull his troops back to keep control of his people? But that, you know, that's other, you know, political people that are power hungry. It's all about power. And I think we could see a situation if the dollar collapses fast, where we will be in quite a bit of trouble, and what we'll be able to do worldwide will be diminished because of the struggle for power in a time of collapse. And you could more than likely expect martial law because people's money ain't going to be worth anything. What they have in a bank will be probably siphoned off. We'll have major issues. Okay. I want to get to something out of Boulder. I just seen this and something I kind of wanted to cover, and it really shows kind of what law enforcement has become and how people are basically treated as criminals no matter what they do. It really gets to the point where, you know, if you act free, you are bad. Now, a lot of people have seen through social media and probably other places, kind of this artist, and he's not a graffiti artist, but he kind of has that I'll just go out and do this type attitude, and he's created a cool looking art, and you've probably seen the photos on Facebook or other social media, but it's the boulders, the river rocks, stacked on top of each other in weird ways that don't seem to look like they would work. Making this pretty cool looking sculpture, rock sculptures. Well, I get this out of truthvoice.com. I've seen it quite a few other places. But Michael Grab, a Boulder artist who goes by the name Gravity Glue, said that police threatened to ticket or jail him for creating stacked river rock sculptures that the community has been enjoying for years. In a Monday Facebook post, Grab explained that a Boulder police officer had informed him that there would be stiff penalties for continuing his art. For the past 7 years, I've been creating this art in and around Boulder, Colorado. Nearly every day, he wrote. Just this weekend, one police officer has decided that balancing rocks in Boulder, Colorado is now illegal, obscurely referencing two city codes 5-4-8 and 5-4-2 about destruction of public property in relation to rocks. So now the police have belligerently taken it upon themselves to write tickets and or arrest anyone balancing rocks in Boulder, Colorado, and specifically threaten to ticket me and or arrest me if they catch me in the future. The artist Lemonade encourages as many people as possible, especially locals, to contact the city council here in Boulder and voice your support for his long-standing tradition in Boulder. It is something that an overwhelming portion of the community supports. sports. Grab said that he would be forced to leave Boulder if the city council did not step in to clarify the city ordinances. Rooster magazine wondered why Boulder police felt the need to focus on draconian rock art witch hunt instead of higher than average rates of rape and theft. Why is any of this important? Because if we ban every bizarro Boulder character that causes a stir, see nude gardening woman, we are left with nothing more than a college town with a target that's about to become Google's new headquarters, the magazine noted. At a time like this, we need less kid gloves in the form of overzealous legislation and more attention paid to retaining the city's core personality. And if you don't like that, effing move to Westminster. Keep Boulder weird and keep Gravity Glue making weird ass rock art. In the end, the call to action worked. Grab said that the city attorney personally called to let him know that rock stacking is not illegal in Boulder. Update. Holy shit. Maybe the support was more than I anticipated, he exclaimed. Just got a call from the city attorney personally here in Boulder telling me that he has ordered police to not cite rock balancing under the city codes mentioned below. Thank you everyone for the overwhelming support. You must have gotten lots of calls. And, one thing is he did have a lot of local support. So, even if you're activists, there's ways to gain the trust and the support and the respect of the people around you. And it's by being a good person. We know of activists out there that are, not the nicest people, claiming to be doing it for liberty or freedom, but you gotta understand, if you're trying to promote liberty and freedom and the only thing that you're associating it with is being a prick or something, it's probably not going to work out for you too well. And it doesn't make your activism somewhat illegal because you're a prick about it, but it's not going to make it. It's not going to help your case out. We all kind of get aggravated and peed off, but there's a lot of good you can do in your community, and it's never really too late to try it. Second here. Isn't working right. I'll lost everything for a second. Trying to find. That's some weird things. All of a sudden kind of flip out on me here. Give me a second. Okay. We've seen the Republicans beating up on Rand Paul, kind of reminiscent of, them beating up on Ron Paul. Oh, we like you, but you're not. You don't know what you're doing. Like, it seems like if he was playing the game, it's more like they played him. And, with this whole Senate coming back Sunday, we're really going to see, if anybody's going to stick by him and who those people are. Now, we heard people that stood up during his filibuster and talk about it. But, a lot of the Republicans seem to be, when it comes to being a presidential candidate, be beating up on him quite a bit. And he has his flaws. And, even though I don't support him, I do think he's probably one of the more liberty-oriented candidates. And I heard people talking about Rick Santorum, and it reminded me, We Are Change put out one yesterday. I watched why you should not vote for Rick Santorum 2016. It's a short clip. I'm going to play it.
Rick Santorum, the former senator of Pennsylvania, has just announced his bid for the 2016 presidential election. And in this video, we're going to tell you why you should not vote for this man. Now, of course, he is branding himself as this blue-collar, pro-religious freedom guy that will destroy ISIS. Well, let's just go over some of his policies and what he really believes. All the links and sources will be in the description below, and I dare you to prove me wrong. Now, of course, Rick Santorum, he just announced that he is going to be the guy who's going to destroy ISIS. How is he going to destroy ISIS? Well, he's going to put troops on the ground in Iraq and Syria. Well, if Rick doesn't understand, it was us sending troops to Iraq that created the vacuum that let ISIS thrive and created an enemy. And now currently ISIS is calling for the U.S. ISIS wants the U.S. to fight in Iraq and in Syria. They want a one-on-one war. Rick Santorum will give them that, even though it was their very same policy that helped foster the creation of ISIS. When he talks about the assassination program that Obama has, where he openly killed American citizens, this is what he said.
You are not safe. And if people say, well, you can't go out and assassinate people, well, tell that to Allah. Okay, we've done it. We've done it for an American citizen. We can certainly do it for someone who's producing a nuclear bomb that can be dropped in the state of Israel.
Obviously, calling for assassinations of not only American citizens, but also Iranian scientists. He also called for preemptive strikes on Iran, and he exaggerates what is currently happening with the country. Now, he is on a full war path with Iran. If he does become president, that will be his first major agenda. Now, it doesn't make sense because in his presidential speech today, he talked about he's going to be the guy who destroys ISIS. How is that going to happen when Iran is the country that is actually fighting ISIS on the ground? Iran is offering U.S. aid in fighting ISIS on the ground in Iraq, but the U.S. rejected it. Iran is still fighting these ISIS terrorists on the ground by themselves with no support from the United States, and they're two separate forces. Meanwhile, Rick Santorum still sees them as an enemy. Now, why is the U.S. not even cooperating with Iran when it comes to destroying their mutual enemy, ISIS? We did that before with our foreign policy, join up with enemies to destroy a bigger enemy. They're not doing it now because a newly declassified U.S. government document that just came out under the Freedom of Information Act saw that the U.S. supported the creation of ISIS as a way to get rid of Assad in Syria. They saw them as an asset. They saw them as an aid. And that's why the U.S. government secretly trained them, funded them, and gave them all the intelligence that they could so they could go after Assad, the foreign policy enemy of the United States. And we are solely, the United States military, solely responsible for not only aiding and abetting these horrible terrorists, but also their creation. Their founder was in the U.S. jail. He was released. And of course, there's so many different documentations that we covered here before on this YouTube channel telling you about this false kind of premise that ISIS is just on its own. No, it was started, created, and funded by the U.S. military to get rid of Assad. Meanwhile, Santorum foreign policy makes no sense in any way, shape, or form, and that's why a couple years ago when he was running for the 2012 election, we asked him this.
War. There's something called a just war theory that, in fact, war sometimes costs a lot less than war.
And what's just about attacking Iran if we're not attacked? What's just about attacking Iran if we're not attacked by them?
You didn't get my vote, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
Excuse me.
I appreciate your answer.
Answer the question. Will you preemptively attack Iran? Will you preemptively attack Iran, Rick? Thank you. Rick, you're going to lead us into World War III. You're crazy.
He's crazy. That's one of my camera guys going after him. As a senator in Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum also ripped off American veterans. So he wants American troops on the ground. Meanwhile, as a senator, he ripped them off. But as Santorum engineered a controversial land deal that robbed the military's top veterans' homes of tens of millions of dollars and worsened the deteriorating conditions at the facility. This is what Rick Santorum did as a senator in Pennsylvania, and this is why in 2006 he wasn't reelected as senator. He failed and lost the election by 18 points. How can a senator who lost an election by 18 points can even consider himself as a viable candidate for the 2016 presidential election? How does it make sense that he disrespects veterans? Meanwhile, he wants more war, more assassination, less freedom in all shapes, ways, and forms. As a senator, he also intended to cut federal funding by proposing a bill that would make it illegal for professors, students, and student organizations to criticize Israel. Again, he wants to violate the First Amendment of freedom of speech and wants to take away federal funding away from people who criticize his favorite country, which of course is Israel. He also said the Patriot Act does not violate the Fourth Amendment, which made me ask him.
You said the Patriot Act doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. Can you tell us what the Fourth Amendment is?
I asked him this question about 7, 8 times, and again, even though he talks a lot to all the other press, he wasn't answering that question, and obviously couldn't even answer what the Fourth Amendment is. I really was curious, since he did say the Patriot Act doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment, which is a totally asinine statement. He also wants to violate people's freedoms when it comes to watching pornography and having same-sex marriage. The dude wants to take away your porn. That should be enough reasons. Now, of course, it is not wrong to have your religious beliefs, but when you're pushing them up to others, you are violating their rights. So him being this pro-religious freedom guy, running as a Christian, is total hypocrisy. He makes statements on his campaign trail saying that same-sex married children are actually left at a detrimental state. This is what Abby Martin and myself talked to him about when he was in Washington, D.C. recently.
Hey Rick, Abby from WRC. You said during your campaign that homosexual parents, that kids don't thrive under homosexual parents, but actually studies have shown that kids thrive equally under homosexual parents as they do straight parents. Do you think this hate?
And of course he didn't answer that question. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with being Christian in any way, shape, or form and having your religious beliefs. We have freedom to believe what we want to believe in, and of course no one should be persecuted because of their religious beliefs. But when it comes to Rick Santorum, he openly supports a child molester. He supports Jerry Sandusky, this total idiotic hypocrite. Send this video out to anyone voting for Rick Santorum. Please, just send it out. All the sources will be in the description below. Prove me wrong. And for whatever you do, if you care about the future of the United States, about your freedom, about future potential endless war with Iran and ISIS, do not vote for Rick Santorum. If you found this informational helpful, click the like button. And of course, do not forget to subscribe. We're going to have a lot more content and videos coming your way.
We are Change. We are Change on YouTube. WeAreChange.org. Okay. Now I have one, this kind of relates to foreign, this one out of truthandmedia.com. U.S. trained foreign special forces commander joins ISIS. It says here, a special forces commander from Tajikistan who has been missing since April appeared Thursday in an online video where he pledged allegiance to Islamic State. Gulmurad Kalamov is perhaps the highest profile defector from the majority Muslim ex-Soviet republic in Central Asia. Since vanishing from duty in late April, he has sparked a search across Tajikistan and endless speculation about his location and intentions. Islamic State's propaganda often targets narrow demographics for recruitment. Russian speakers in Central Asia are one of those groups. One preteen boy from Kazakhstan has been the star of several ISIS videos. In Thursday's video, Kalamov speaks in accented Russian while Tajik language religious songs play. He identifies himself as a colonial in Tajikistan Special Forces, or colonel in it. He claims he received training from Russian and American Special Forces in Moscow and in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He also boasts about training by the U.S. private military contractor Blackwater. Addressing the many ethnic Tajiks who work as migrant workers in Russia, he says that living under a secular democratic government amounts to being servants of infidels, when as Muslims they ought instead to be servants of Allah. But this argument he urges them repeatedly to immigrate to the jihadi group's purported state in Syria and Iraq. If you were believers, you would have known to come here. Echoing the group's interpretation of Islam, he calls immigration to Islamic State a religious duty, marveling at the diversity of nations represented in the jihadist territory. The video, incidentally, was released shortly after a United Nations report saying that Islamic terrorist groups enjoy members from over 100 countries worldwide. He taunts the government of Tajikistan, which he recently served, saying that Islamic State is soon coming to re-establish Syria there. He also addresses American swine, saying that in his 3 visits to the country, he has seen how you prepare soldiers to eliminate Muslims and Islam. He vows that in retribution, we will come to your homes and we will kill you. As though to prove his point, he places a tomato on a post and shoots it with a sniper rifle from dozens of yards away. Russia and its allies in Central Asia have repeatedly raised the alarm over Islamist radicalization and unrest in the decades since the fall of the Soviet Union. Hundreds of Central Asians have joined ISIS since it came to prominence in 2014. So that's from Truth and Media. So, now one thing they like to say to us about when we talk about non-intervention and foreign policy, you want the country to be attacked. No, I believe that our doings over there have helped, spark this. And it's one of those things that we kind of create the problem and then think that we're going to fix the problem by going back. Rick Santorum would tell you to believe that. I don't even think he actually believes it. But it's not him fighting. He wants to be in the seat here comfy, not worrying about it. And, of course, he thinks, well, you just keep the fight over there, keep the fight over there. Well, you eventually spend so much time involved over there that you don't see what happens here. Oh, well, then we need the security that goes against your rights so we can fight the terrorism. Well, government's constantly taken freedom and said they would give us more security, and they never actually deliver. You know, we haven't had an actual declared war since World War II. Well, you look at everything going on. Wonder why. Are we winning these wars? We were in the Gulf War. Did we? Or did we not go in again after Saddam? You really look at it, we haven't won wars because we haven't had a legit war. And, you know, a lot of people, yeah, that's why the soldiers are bad. Well, no. You know, at one point, I wanted to join the military. But luckily, I kind of was a free thinker and could question things. And luckily, my mind made connections at an early enough age that I didn't sign the papers. I understood what kind of the basis of what was going on just from using my common sense, not really being influenced, just using my common sense and looking at issues and things and going, does that help? No. People are suckered into it because they really want to believe in freedom. They want to believe that they have this national pride type thing in them. It becomes one of those things that you kind of get suckered into it. Some people realize that it's all sham, that they were basically used as puppets. A lot of people got extremely rich off of your blood, sweat, and tears and your buddies' lives. Rich. Extremely rich. And how are you doing? And when more soldiers are able to wake up to that and really spread that information, that way younger ones don't join. When there's a legit war where the majority of people feel like their freedom, their livelihood is under threat, don't stand up and fight. You don't have to convince them. And just, you know, when we're in these type of situations, definitely a war on terrorism. How long do you think we're going to be fighting that war? Until someone goes, hey, terrorism's ideology, can't kill it. And it has many different, you know, immolations of what it means to different people, different groups, different cultures. Get to a point where we're going to end up seeing the divide and conquer, the blood, sweat, and tears, the loss of friends, family, and our country is going to still collapse. And the people that were involved in getting us into the wars, the people involved in manipulating you into the wars, the people involved in staging events to get you into wars, will get away with the wealth of the country. And right now, some of the only industries that aren't doing too bad. Tend to be industries that are contracted by the military industrial complex. I'm sure Raytheon is doing pretty well. I'm sure every time Israel sends up 10 rockets to intercept one, they actually send missile, warhead type rockets to intercept one little rocket, metal tiny rocket launch. That's going chick chick ching. Raytheon just made some more. When bombs are dropped in these corporations that are tied to all that, get to make more money. And it's sad because most of those workers that are in there doing a lot of the work with these corporations, shuffling papers or, making something, or they're not going, oh, this is going to kill innocent people. Hey, here goes some more to kill innocent people. Some of them realize it and choose to ignore it. But the more you're involved in other nations, the more you're involved in fighting in other nations, the more time you spend there, the more casualties of innocent people will stack up. The more casualties of the innocent people that stack up, the more hatred that will build. When you withdraw and that hatred's already built, and it's built up to a proportion that creates something that is formidable at some point, and you go, we'll go back in there. You're feeding into it, and history, I think, has also shown that in a lot of wars, the armies by the empires tend to have problems with the rebel groups, the smaller ragtags. You could look at Rome. Rome took on other armies of other empires. Rome also took on ragtag, tribal groups up in the north, in the UK, in Britain, in Germany, and had problems. One, they expanded too much. Two, they were ready to fight out in the field against armies. They weren't ready for ambushes and all this. You can look at Great Britain against their American colonists. You can look at Vietnam. Even though, North Korea, you could argue, well, they were a country they weren't that big of an empire. They were struggling for all of Vietnam. They weren't trying to take another country and then another country and then another country. They weren't empire status. And they fought guerrilla style. There's few occasions where the ragtags might have had some problems. We can look at the Native Americans. Well, how was a lot of this done? Through treaties. They make treaties and then go in an ambush. In a way, at that point, we were, in a way, fighting more guerrilla style with the Native Americans. And then groups of Native Americans that couldn't fight, and eventually we were able to march them off to the southeast or southwest, I meant, and move them out west, move them away from us. And you have your reservations, and yeah, we have problems. But we're going to have more problems if we keep being the globalist empire, iron fist, moral judgers of the world. It's not going to work out for you and me. But there will be people that leave this country extremely wealthy, that played their cards and sold the rest of you down the river. And they're able to accomplish this. Why? Because we have a government. And I don't just say a tyrannical government. I say a government. Because whenever governments are created, their powers always expand to absolute power and absolute corruption. If we could have that minimal government where it's 100% transparent, you can opt in or out of it because you cannot be forced taxation. It has to be voluntary. Basically, it would be an organization. Government would be an organization that goes, we need this done. Do you guys agree? They're like, no, we're not going to war with those people. It'll benefit you. No, I'm not. I'm not going to go fight, and I'm not paying. No. Or, hey, we're being attacked. People are trying to hurt us. Yes, I'll support that, or I'll fight for that, or it needs to be volunteer based. Government doesn't like that because it leaves it open a free market for another organization to come in and do a better job. And to all of that, taxation is key. The legalization of theft of wealth is key for government to not need your permission. That's why taxation is theft. We're coming up to the end of the broadcast, so I want to urge everybody to go to ucy.tv and click the UCY store tab and check out UCY's Amazon store. They have partnered with the Amazon to give you the same great deals you find on Amazon, but by going through that link, you're helping support UCY.tv and all the great broadcasts here on UCY. And you get the same great deals, same great shipping prices, great camping, prepping, and radiation gear. UCY.tv, click the UCY store tab. And also check out My Patriot Supply for non-GMO seeds. Go to antityrannynews.com/My Patriot.